How's it going, everybody? Bryan Alvarez here on After Dark Radio. We are here every Wednesday, 2 Pacific, 5 Eastern, Sports Byline Broadcasting Network, TuneIn Radio, f4wonline.com/YouTube, and twitch.tv/f4w video. And we got a very exciting show today. Ross Allison is going to be joining us. A Ghost was founded by Ross Allison in 2001. It is the oldest paranormal investigation group in the Pacific Northwest. Ross is the Pacific Northwest's only full-time paranormal investigator. 30 years of experience. He has been featured on Sci-Fi's Ghost Hunters, Travel Channel's Ghost Adventures, CNN, ABC Nightline, the Sci-Fi Channel, Evening Magazine, Food Network, and more. And he is the author of several books on the paranormal, I think 12. We'll have to ask him. But Ross Allison is going to be our guest today, and we are going to be talking ghost hunting and ghosts here in the Pacific Northwest. So I got a lot of questions for Ross Allison, including the Bothell Hell House. He does tours. If you're in the Pacific Northwest, you can do ghost walking tours in downtown Seattle. So we'll ask him about that as well. And some of his scariest experiences. He has been doing this for a long time. 30 years. So Ross Allison is our guest here today. If you want to text us a question for Ross, you can either do it via text message 425-780-7566. That is 425-780-7566. You can email me, Bryan at AfterDarkRadioShow.com, or you can post it in the YouTube or the Twitch chat. So a lot of different ways to contact us here today. But that will be coming up after the break, and it should be a good time. So welcome to New Year, everybody. We got 4 straight weeks of shows featuring guests starting today. We're talking everything from ghosts to Bigfoot and more. Back in a moment, After Dark Radio, Sports Byline Broadcasting Network. show. Bryan Alvarez here, After Dark Radio, every Wednesday, 2 Pacific, 5 Eastern, Sports Byline Broadcasting Network, TuneIn Radio, YouTube, and Twitch. And we are very happy today to be joined by Ross Allison. He is the Pacific Northwest only full-time paranormal investigator, 30 years of experience, and he's local. Ross, how you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. How you guys doing?
Very good. I am, in fact, here in Bothell, Washington, and so I'm very excited to have you on the show today because a lot of stuff in the Northwest, is there not?
Oh, my gosh. They'd be surprised. You know, a lot of people think that we'd have less ghost stories than compared to, like, the East Coast because, you know, Washington's the youngest state in the country. And we have our fair share of, you know, unfortunate events and bad things that have happened, and I think there's lots of ghost stories to tell.
Well, before I get greedy and ask about a lot of things that I want to ask about locally, tell everybody a little bit about yourself. You've been doing this full-time 30 years, as noted. How did you first get into this?
Oh, I blame my mother. There are some stories you can't blame your parents for, and my mother loves ghost stories, so I grew up listening to these stories, and I just was very fascinated with them. I wanted to know, you know, do people really experience this stuff? And you have to understand, when I got involved in ghost hunting, it was not a big thing. It was a really hard outlet to get into, and I just basically happened to fall into the right track. So I was living in the Bay Area for a little bit and got to work with some of the bigger names out there, and it just kind of took off. And when I moved back to Washington, I found out there weren't any ghost hunting groups or anything out here, and ended up starting the first one.
And that would be A Ghost.
A Ghost, the Advanced Ghost Hunters of Seattle, Tacoma.
Yeah, from 2001, which is... That's a long time ago. I mean, I'm old, but even now looking back, it's like, man, 2001 was a long time ago. That's a long time you've been doing this.
I'm feeling aged here, too.
So when you started the organization, I mean, had you already, I guess if you've been doing this 30 years, 2001, you know, was not 30 years ago, had you already been doing some investigations? And I guess the other question would be, what were those like prior to the explosion of all these ghost hunting shows, where now everybody's on TV, they got this gadget, they got that gadget? I mean, were you using the traditional ghost hunting paraphernalia back in 2001 and prior, or how were things done back then?
Well, it was a lot different. You have to understand that this was before the digital era, so we were still using, you know, analog cassettes and film when we were out there ghost hunting. You know, now everything's digital, so it's a little more cost effective. But, you know, the technology has advanced quite a bit as well. So we've been lucky enough to ride that train and follow the technology. Now, I've always been more scientific in my approach. So I've always loved having the technology to help us record the phenomena and help us to have a better understanding of what's going on. Because a lot of people don't seem to understand there's no such thing as a ghost meter. There's no device out there that's going to tell you, yes, you have a ghost in your house and who's haunting it. So we are still limited on using devices that help us read the environment, you know, temperature, light, different variances, and help us to tie those variances to oddities that are happening on the property. So it's still a bit of a challenge, but as the technology becomes more advanced and more affordable for us, I think we'll have better ideas as to what's going on out there.
You know what's funny is you talk about technological advances and the rise of digital cameras and everything like that. And whether it's ghosts or Bigfoot or UFOs or whatever, when you really think about it, it's almost like we kind of have to go back to less technologically advanced mediums, in the sense that if you see a picture online nowadays, you know, there's a decent chance it's AI. Whereas back in the day, this alleged primitive technology like photography, it's like you at least had a negative that you could examine. You know, is this on the negative or was it doctored? So it's almost like the old school technology that was far more difficult to fake than the modern technology with digital cameras and AI and everything.
Oh yeah, and people do have to be careful too, because as apps on our phone are, geared towards ghost hunters and other type of phenomena, a lot of these apps are manipulating the user. They have hidden images and hidden audio inside them, and they're just out there to entertain, those out there trying to seek communication with the other side, and they don't realize that they're just being fooled. So, you have to be aware of that as well. It's so easy to manipulate the evidence that we're trying to provide, and I can understand why, skepticism can be back at the forefront, because a 3-year-old could freaking, edit a video on their phone, It's pretty easy nowadays to manipulate the audience, and so I think for me and my team, we're really trying to focus on collecting the data points, to line it up to actual experiences, so that when we have to present evidence, we have all the information we can give you before the phenomena and even after the phenomena. So we try to be very transparent in our, procedures.
Now, you have had personal experiences, and anybody who has had a personal experience believes that the experience happened. If you actually see Bigfoot, you're not going to be convinced there is no Bigfoot. If you actually have an experience where you're grabbed and there's no one there, you're going to believe in the phenomenon. So clearly you believe in this phenomenon. But I guess the question would be, what do you believe it is? Are ghosts dead people? Are ghosts some phenomenon that we don't understand, and because we don't understand it, we say it's dead people? What is this?
Well, I think you hit it on the head with the last one. It's we don't understand enough. We know that there's something out there. There are quite a few credible people that have amazing experiences, and yet we still don't have all the answers as to what's going on. I find myself, even though I have these experiences, like you said, being touched, I've been touched, I've seen dark shadows move across the room, but I always find myself second guessing myself as well. So I rely on the technology that hopefully something was captured as well to validate that experience. So we always talk about the 3 data points. So you're hoping that there's a personal experience, hopefully there's multiple points of data to validate that experience as well, so that you can submit it out there and say, there's something to this. Now, is it ghosts? I'm not sure. I've been in this field long enough to say, yes, there's something to this. We're not just, chasing, our imagination. There's something out there, and we're just hoping that we can have enough data to validate these encounters. I would love to say, yes, it's ghosts. I think enough experiences that people have had can, push us towards that belief. But I still like to be a little more open-minded and say, you know what, maybe there's more to this than we understand.
Well, I'm generally a skeptic about a lot of this stuff, even though I do this show. But having done this show as long as I have, I do believe that the idea that whatever phenomenon it is, Bigfoot, UFOs, ghosts, whatever, I don't believe everybody's lying. I believe that most people are truthful. They believe that they saw something, and I just want to know what it is. If it's just some weird phenomenon that, like, some glitch in reality that causes people, hey, I just want to know what it is. I don't know what it is, but I believe that there must be something, because I have a really good friend. I have a really good friend that claimed that he was grabbed at a place I was at. And I, not for 1 second would I ever think this guy is lying. He is telling the truth. He believes. I don't know what it is, but I believe it.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up, because one of the things that I have been working on for years now is trying to validate touch.
Well, hold on. Let's hold that thought. We're going to go to a break. We'll talk about ghostly touch after the break. After Dark Radio, Sports Byline Broadcasting Network. Bryan Alvarez here, After Dark Radio, every Wednesday, 2 Pacific, 5 Eastern, Sports Byline Broadcasting Network. Tune in, radio, YouTube, and Twitch. Ross Allison is joining us here today, and he is local here to the Seattle area. And Ross, there is a Rebecca's Lodge in Bothell, and it is like 100-something years old, I think. It's really old. Used to be like an Oddfellows Lodge. And we used to do jiu-jitsu. I used to teach a jiu-jitsu class upstairs. And we never talked about anything like this. But several of the students came up to me privately, and they were like, something really weird happened. I got to tell you about this. And, you know, one guy was sitting there, like everyone's in a circle stretching, and, you know, he felt big pat on his shoulder. He turned around, nobody there. You know, there were doors opening and closing. I mean, it was weird. And we later found we were cleaning the place out, and we found this big coffin-shaped box. And in fact, we opened the coffin-shaped box, and it was a coffin. There were bones in there that apparently they'd used like years ago as part of like some ritual in this Oddfellows Lodge.
Oh, yes, I've heard about that, yeah.
I never questioned. I mean, especially my friend who said he'd been tapped on. I mean, he is a straight shooter. He's the nicest guy. He is not making up some story. And I don't know what's going on there, but it's definitely something's going on. And he was touched.
Well, I have to say, it's been an interesting phenomena for myself because we've had quite a few cases come to us where people have been touched by ghosts. And I'd have to say it was about 8 years ago, a young man reached out to me, and he was telling me that he was remodeling an upstairs attic space. It was mostly storage. It wasn't really an attic. It used to be rooms up there, but it's been abandoned. And he was remodeling, and all of a sudden he felt somebody touch him in a very personal place. And this phenomena happened multiple times after that initial one. And so when he reached out to me to, you know, tell me these experiences, you know, we found out that this used to be an old brothel that he was working in, and that, you know, other people have had these, you know, claims as well. And it was just like, for me, as long as I've been in this field, it's when people tell me they've been touched, unfortunately, it is a personal experience. How do you prove that when, you know, somebody's had that physical contact? You know, unless there's been some physical, you know, mark left behind, it's just your personal experience. And it really got me thinking. I was just like, you know, I would love to believe that these people have had these encounters, but I need more for my personal self to prove this. Or even if you're trying to prove it scientifically, there's got to be something out there that we could do. And as I started doing research, I started to find that no one has ever tried to prove touch. And so I spent years trying to come up with ideas and trying to validate physical touch from the other side. And I ended up teaming up with a real scientist. And we actually had finished a documentary called Parasense, The Naked Experiments, where we actually put naked subjects alone in a room where people have been touched by ghosts, and we document their physical encounters. He puts together equipment that has never been used in the world of, you know, paranormal research, and we monitor to see if we can correlate a physical encounter with the equipment. And we actually are the first to track this phenomena when people actually had experiences. In one case in this documentary, we had a young man get scratched during one of our experiments. And we documented, you know, that phenomena from the very beginning till the end. So there is something to this. And it's been an interesting adventure for us as we continue to do. We're filming the second one now. We actually won a couple awards for the first documentary. And so we're actually working on the second one because we don't have all the answers. We're still coming up with new experiments, new technology to see if we can validate these encounters.
We have a listener here who says, in college, a professor asked a huge lecture hall, how many students have encountered a ghost? I thought, well, this should be about 0. Turns out I was one of the only students not raising their hand. I will never forget that. How common is this?
Wow. Well, it's a lot more common than people think. And when it comes to individuals who don't believe in ghosts, they're usually not paying attention. People have always asked me, how often does paranormal phenomena happen? And I say it's 24/7. A lot of times we're just not paying attention to the phenomena. We're more paying attention at night when we're in relax mode. The stereo's not playing, the TV's not playing, and now you'll start to hear those footsteps going up and down the halls. So that's when people tend to, pay attention to things. But there's activity all the time, and I feel a lot of times most people ignore it, And so I think there's definitely something to this. Skeptics alone will come to me and say, I don't know if I believe in ghosts, but this happened to me. Can you explain?
So you mentioned 24/7. I've heard, if you watch these ghost hunting shows, everything's done at night. And it appears to be more for the vibe. I mean, if there's paranormal activity, it's going to happen at any time during the day. Or do you find that it happens more at night?
Well, it can happen at night. And the reason why we tend to do most investigations at night is it's because a couple reasons. For one, the technology that we use with infrared cameras can pick up phenomena, and it does have to be dark to be able to see that. So there's that advantage by using infrared cameras. The other thing is you're also in a more controlled environment. You can't do an investigation when the business is up and running. When you got customers coming and going.
Sure.
It's harder to do an investigation when there's, lots of traffic happening in the house, lots of things happening in the house. So we tend to focus our investigations when we have a more controlled environment. But one thing that is extremely important is journaling. When people have experiences, they believe they're living in a haunted house, journal your experiences. You may actually find that there's a pattern to the activity. And when we can track down that pattern, that's the best time to actually do an investigation. If it's happening around at noon, then we'll come in and do an investigation at noon. But like I said earlier, a lot of people don't pay attention to this stuff until it is at nighttime. When you're in relax mode, that's when you are more aware of what's happening around you.
So you've had many experiences, and you've met, I'm sure, countless people who have had experiences. And, when people think about ghosts, what you hear is, I'm afraid of ghosts, or scary, or Halloween is always about fear and everything. But would you say that the vast majority of haunted experiences actually are not scary? They're more weird?
You hit it right on the head. It's basically the social media and media tends to focus on the scary element or try to scare the audience because that's when it draws in more people. We're all the ones that want to stop and look at a horrible accident that has just happened down the street, So we are drawn to the fear elements of a lot of this. But in most cases, it's actually very tame. Most people that would go out and do a ghost hunt, they would probably find themselves falling asleep. It's a lot of sitting around, waiting patiently for something to happen. So it actually can be very tame, but I think a lot of people tend to focus on the fear element because most ghost hunting shows now focus on demons and, things are out to get you, to harm you, or even kill you. So I think that's one of the things that we have to open people's minds to the idea that, just because you have a paranormal experience does not mean that it's out to harm you.
Now speaking of touch, just for an example, during the day, how many times you've been in your house and where are the nail clippers? They're always right here. They're just gone and they shouldn't be gone. And, there's probably a prosaic explanation for it. But would that conceivably be an example of a paranormal experience of some kind. The nail clippers is a bad example, but you know what I'm saying. Something weird that happens. It happens during the day. You think it's weird, but you don't think much about it. But who knows? Maybe it was something more.
And that is some of the phenomena that people do report, and that's why it's important for us as paranormal investigators to try to determine, could it just be absent-mindedness, people setting things in a different place, moving things around themselves. Is there other people on the property that would have access to those toenail clippers and may have moved them? You do have to do your own deduction work and trying to determine whether this could be a valid paranormal experience or just people kind of wishing it was,
Do you have kind of a love-hate relationship with these reality shows? Because obviously you've been on many, but at the same
Oh,
time,
yeah.
they're sometimes preposterous.
Well, I'll be honest with you. I've been cut from shows because they wanted me to lie about experiences and stories, and I refuse. I had one show that I was there telling stories about what I experienced there, and they're like, "Oh, could you, please tell us that you'll never come back here again?" And I'm like, I'm not going to go on national television as a ghost hunter and say I'm too scared to come back here again when I'm not,
Yeah.
So there is a lot of that going on. There's a lot of misuse of equipment and a lot of bad equipment being used to hype up ghosts.
Well, hold that thought. We'll talk more about ghost hunting and some local landmarks after the break. Observe After Dark Radio, Sports Byline Broadcasting Network. Back in the show, Bryan Alvarez here, After Dark Radio, Sports Byline Broadcasting Network, TuneIn Radio, YouTube, Twitch, many places to listen to the show, 2 Pacific, 5 Eastern every Wednesday. And Ross Allison is joining us here today. If you are interested and in the area, by the way, spookedinseattle.com is the website. And we'll talk about that here in a while. You can go on a walking tour of haunted places around the Seattle area. And there's a number of books that Ross has written, a lot of podcasts he's been on. But we were talking about the misuse of alleged ghost hunting equipment, which is a problem.
Oh, yeah. It's one of the things that I see on television shows a lot, where they don't know how to use the equipment or even understand the equipment, so they get a lot of misleading readings, and they try to use it as proof to the paranormal. So it can get frustrating, I tell you.
Now, I live here in Seattle, as noted, and I want to do some very selfish questions about the local scene. And what better person to ask than you? I guess the first question is, what would you say is the most haunted location in all of the Northwest? You got to pick one. If someone's going to go there, they got a good chance of something happening.
It's a tough one. You got to understand with ghost hunting, it's all about being at the right place at the right time. A lot of places have amazing stories to tell about their hauntings. I had the chance to go through the Amityville house, and nothing happened. Am I saying it's not haunted? No, it's right place, right time. So for me, places like the Seattle Underground. I used to be a tour guide for the Seattle Underground tours, and so I had access to the underground locations, for years. And, being alone in some of those places, you tend to have experiences. So for me, I've had more experiences in the Seattle Underground because I had access to it. And so there are some great stories that I could tell you about the Seattle Underground. So that's one of my, favorite places. Merchants Cafe is another good place. University Heights is another great place, because I know I can validate that these places have had encounters. I've experienced them myself.
Is there anything to the legends of the Maltby Cemetery? Have you heard these?
Yes, I'm very familiar with that story.
This was a big thing when I was in high school.
To hell.
Yes, yes.
Yes. Unfortunately, it is private property, so they have had so many problems because of the legend of the 13 steps to hell. They say as you're going down the steps, there's lots of different stories, but I believe the main one is as you're going down the steps, you'll see how you'll die or something like that. But it is a private cemetery. It's surrounded by a bunch of private homes, and so they will call the cops if they see people wandering around. And I think it's just become a big legend because a lot of young kids in that area just like to go there and scare each other. And it's just the stories have been passed around.
So is it still a big thing today? Because I'm talking in the early 90s when I was in high school. It was like everybody... that was where we wanted to go and check that place out.
Yes, and go and drink and hang out with your girlfriend. Yep, I've heard all the stories. I would say probably not as much because of the fact that they've done a lot to prevent people from going on that property. So a lot of people don't get to share their local stories or experiences that they've had there. But yeah, I'm very well familiar with that place.
Sounds like
when
we
I
should
first
turn
started
that
my
into
group, we went there. Yeah.
Sounds like we should turn that into a conspiracy theory. You're not allowed on the grounds of the Maltby Cemetery. So you did an investigation there? Did you find anything? Are there actually
nothing.
steps?
But they're not 13 steps.
Okay.
It actually went down into a little tomb.
Okay.
So there was one of the burial vaults that were there. There was I think maybe 6 or 8 steps that went down the tomb. It was not 13. And that's where they used to say that you would see the flashing of your death.
Now, there's also the very famous Bothell Hell House, which I don't even think is actually in Bothell. I'm kind of iffy on the location. But
That-
it's been a pretty famous story for the last probably 20 years. I guess 2005 the house was built or something like that. So not even like an old location. It was like a new house.
Yeah, I've heard the stories on that one. What was it? The poltergeist, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Uh, Ghost Adventures went out there, investigated, and they didn't have anything happen. So I do know the story. I never investigated it. It was one of those that there was far too many people involved by the time they got around to contacting us. So it kind of became this huge thing. And then the guy who was experiencing that stuff, he moved
Yeah.
and claimed to have the stuff follow him and never heard back from him. So, you know, I have no personal experiences there, so I can't say anything. But at the time, you also have to consider that there was big hype on trying to get on a lot of these television shows.
Yes.
We had a lot of problems with people trying to get us to convince us that their places were haunted, and they weren't. I had a grandmother and her grandson that were living in a place, and they were staging stuff, trying to convince us that their place was haunted, just so that they could try and get on some of these television shows.
So a
So
healthy
that was a
skepticism
big
about
problem.
the Bothell Hell House.
Yeah, I would say so.
Now, you mentioned the underground and you had experiences there, and you did note when alone. And is this a common thing with paranormal experiences? Like, obviously, you would want somebody with you to verify all of this. But, you know, if you study, like, you know, we talk about Bigfoot here a lot on the show, and, you know, a lot of the people that have Bigfoot experiences, I mean, you know, some of them even kind of go into the paranormal realm, like, you know, they find some way to not leave tracks. They find some way to not be seen. Do you find with ghosts, people's stories of ghosts, that it's more likely for something to occur when you're alone?
Well, I think when you're alone, you're more aware of everything that's going on around you. Again,
Sure.
you're not distracted by talking to your buddy or your friend that's hanging out with you, and so again, I think that's just one of those situations where you're just more aware of what's going on when you're alone.
Are a lot of the paranormal activity and stories around the Northwest Native American related?
There are some stories. I tend to think that people forget that we have this Native American history. And so the problem with, these encounters that people have, they want to relate them to tragic events. Oh, Elvis Presley stayed here one night, so we see a ghost, so it must be Elvis Presley. Things like that tend to happen a lot more. And being that we don't always have a direct communication with the other side, we're always, trying to figure out who this haunting could be. And most people tend to forget that there is a rich Native American history here. And one of the oldest ghost stories in Seattle actually is of a Native American being seen walking down the beach area, and people would see this Native American, and then he would just vanish right in front of their eyes.
Isn't there
So there
also
is.
isn't there also a
Go
story
ahead.
of like a Native American woman in Pike Place Market?
Yep.
Yeah.
Princess Angeline, the daughter of Chief Seattle.
Yep.
She had been seen quite a bit in and around the area. There's even stories where she had been seen on one of the ferries. She would travel on the ferries going back and forth, and people say that they see her apparition on a ferry.
Do people still report
yeah.
seeing her today? Or is it kind of petered out a little bit?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know if people are actually reporting a lot of encounters anymore, because people have gotten to the point where they've got accustomed to ghosts or the belief in ghosts. So it's just a personal excitement that they don't need to reach out to, people like me and say, yes, we've had these encounters. Most people now kind of do their own little ghost hunt, so they're not looking to, get the validation from our team or any other team. They're just looking for validation for themselves. So we don't always get the calls that we used to.
So they're doing it on their own as opposed to, hey, we need to get someone to do this for us. We
Exactly,
saw
because
this on Ghost
most ghost
Hunters. We can get that device.
That's true. These ghost hunting shows make it seem so easy, so a lot of people will just invest in their own little, pieces of equipment or download those horrible, horrible apps and do their own ghost hunts and, communicate with the ghosts in their own way. So ghost hunting, unfortunately for us, has become a huge hype and very competitive as well.
I won't lie, we did an investigation at the Rebecca's Lodge, but I mean, it was mostly like recording audio and taking photos, and I think we had an EMF detector, which did like go a little bit crazy, but I mean, God, that place is so old. I mean, that could have been anything that caused that thing. We didn't know, we had no idea what we were doing, but it was kind of, we thought we had to do it after all of these weird things that people were reporting. So what did
Well,
you
if you'd
see in the
love to have,
underground?
I was going to say, if you'd love to have some company, I'd love to join you sometime.
I may be talking to you here because I think I can still get access. So,
Oh, that'd be cool.
what did you see in the underground?
Well, the underground, quite a few things. When I first started working there, I remember I was closing up one night, and so that meant I had to go to all the different sections of the underground and turn out all the lights and lock up all the doors, and you would be doing this alone. And I was alone in one section of the underground when all of a sudden I just got this eerie feeling that there was somebody behind me. And right when I turned around, this gush of air just shot right past me, like somebody just ran right through me. And that was pretty shocking. But then later, before COVID happened, I actually owned a part of the underground. And when I had my, death museum and everything, and we had a section of the underground that was haunted by a little girl. And so, knowing that this little girl was haunting this location that we had owned, we bought her a little doll. And this was a doll that had a little wind-up key in the back, and if you wound her up, she would play an old, music box music. And so she wasn't working. This music box stopped working, and so we never were able to get it to work. But every so often, it would play by itself. And
Really?
we actually captured it on video once where we were doing an investigation. The guy walks into the room with the doll, and all of a sudden he stops like, oh my gosh, the music box is playing, the doll. And everybody gets all excited, and they're all like, oh my God, this is so cool. And so the investigator, he wants to get the best quality of this music box, so he's telling everybody on the team to be quiet. So he says, hush out loud to get everybody to be quiet. And right when he says hush out loud, the doll stops too. And this is all
Wow.
on video.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right, stand by. We're going to be back in just a moment with more After Dark Radio Sports Byline Broadcasting Network. Here, After Dark Radio, Sports Byline Broadcasting Network. Ross Allison is joining us here today. And the website is Spooked in Seattle, which is spookedinseattle.com. And everything you want to know about everything we've talked about here today, if you're in the Seattle area, you want to go on a ghost tour, first off, contact me, and we can all go together. But, Ross, tell us about the tours and anything else you've got to promote here, books, etc.
Well, yes, definitely in the tours. We run the tours by real ghost hunters, so we share about our own personal experiences and stories, and we tell the real stuff. But also there's ghost.org, the Advanced Ghost Hunters of Seattle-Tacoma. That is our ghost hunting group. So if you are experiencing any paranormal activity, definitely look us up, and we're more than happy to do an investigation, and it's free of cost. My books, you can check out all my books. I've written 12 books. Most of them are featured on Amazon.com, so you can look up Ross Allison there. Tons of shows. Parasense is on a lot of the streaming networks. It's won a couple awards. If you want to see us, how we conduct our investigations using real science, that's also something to check out as well. So there's a lot of ways to find me. Facebook as well.
Everywhere out there. Ross Allison, everybody. Spookedinseattle.com. Yeah, I want to thank you so much for doing the show today. It flew by, and hopefully we can get you on again, and I will see if we can maybe get into that Rebecca's Lodge and see what we can see there, because that'd be a show unto itself, in fact. So,
you bet. Well, sounds exciting.
Thank you so much for doing the show here today. And, of course, thank you, everybody, for listening. We'll talk to you next Wednesday, After Dark Radio, Sports Byline Broadcasting Network.